Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Skalberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are happy to be here with you today, and we're going to be talking about educational options beyond high school for students with disabilities or special learning differences. So if you are attending a webinar for the first time with us, welcome. We're so glad you're here. If you've attended webinars with us in the past, welcome back. I always like to go over a few housekeeping items right at the beginning. Today we are in webinar mode, and what that means is that we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're there and we're glad that you're here. Our chat box is open and you are welcome to put your questions in the chat box today. We'll get to as many as time allows. If you're planning your day, we're going for an hour today. And if you had sent a question in ahead of this webinar, I do have those questions and we're going to go over those during our time together. So I just asked people to put in the chat box, where is everybody listening in from today? We were shocked. The other night we had a webinar and somebody was listening in from South Korea. So we, Consolidated Planning Group, we are a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We are nationally certified as Social Security advisors, members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, chartered special needs consultants. Our whole firm is nuanced in planning for special needs. We are domiciled in Texas, and we do serve clients all across the United States. So if you're listening in from another state, this is good for you as well. So we always like to talk about the differences of, a financial planning firm, a traditional financial planning firm, and one that is specifically nuanced with special needs. I myself am a parent to three adult kids with disabilities, and what we do and how we do it matters as it relates to their eligibility or future eligibility, continued eligibility for state and federally funded programs. I'm talking about things like SSI and Medicaid. I'm talking about Medicaid waivers. There are also other programs that some of our children are involved with, like vocational rehab or VR. And so I always like to say, whether you work with us or you work with somebody else, work with somebody that is specifically nuanced and special needs. There is an intersection of financial planning and special needs planning because ultimately, as parents, we're the payer of the future care for our child. So we're paying for it while we're alive, and we're going to be funding the trust for them in the future. So making sure that we have money in the right buckets to preserve that eligibility is really, really important. And so while other financial advisors are great, when they don't have an understanding of some of these public benefit programs, you can accidentally make a mistake when it comes to planning. So that's why we suggest that you do work with a specialist. So whenever it comes to planning for the future of your family, there's a lot of things that we're planning for. We're planning for retirement, 25 to 35 years that a family might be spending in retirement. And then a lot of times that we are spending another 25 to 35 years after you're gone will be the future care needs for your loved one. So we help people put lifetime care and protection plans in place. We do a lot of transition planning, help people set up ABLE accounts. We do future cost of care estimates, and what that is answering that question of how much money do I need to fund the special needs trust. And a lot of times we'll do those multiple scenarios, like small, medium, and large, because a lot of the families that we work with, when their child is, around 18, 19, 20, they're not there yet. They're not where they're going. So we help people plan for the worst and hope for the best. And so we'll do multiple scenarios on that. And we do a lot of advocacy by way of our webinars. This little flower in the right-hand corner, that's the Consolidated Planning Group logo. We all of our webinars live on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to for free. There are hundreds and hundreds of webinars out there on planning for special needs. And I started building that out when my kids were transitioning into adulthood. I felt like everything that we were doing was really hard and really difficult, and I understood it backwards and forwards. And so a lot of the knowledge that we've gained along the way, if you can think of a topic, we've probably covered it, and it's out there on that YouTube channel, and you can search titles appropriately. We've got things on government benefits, how and when to apply, special needs trust, guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, you name it, it's out there. Able accounts, it's all there. Okay. So, a lot of times people come to us and they say they feel pretty overwhelmed. They've done some planning, but they're not sure if it's right. They need a second opinion. Some people have done a lot of planning, and it was a lot of years ago, and they just want to check up to see where they are. And some people come to us and they just need to get started. And so, what I would say is this is something that sometimes gets put on the shelf because we're busy and our lives are busy. And a lot of times it gets put on the shelf because we're putting off the things that we feel uncomfortable with, or that we feel like we aren't as knowledgeable as we could be, or things like that. But that's where we come in to help. Okay, so some of the concepts, we're going to be talking about higher education for our kids with disabilities today. And my personal experience as a parent in researching this is research early for post high school options. If we're thinking of a transition program, or like ISS, they used to be called day hab programs. There are vocational paths, there's higher education. So there's all kinds of opportunities out there, and all opportunities are not created equally. There's not just this one repository of all the information that you need, and all of them do things a little bit differently. So you want to research early. You want to get on any waiting list, have an understanding of when applications open, when they close, if there are any funding, grants, or scholarships that might be out there. These are all things that you want to start on, and start early. And, there's been something said, nothing about them without them. So including your loved one on this journey with you is going to be an important thing as you do that. So we're going to be talking about the educational options beyond high school, exploring the options, finding a school, how to get support, and how to pay for this. So there's a lot of misnomers out there that if our kid has a learning disability or learning challenges, that there is not options for them beyond high school. And that is simply not true. There are a lot of programs out there and specific departments at colleges, universities, community colleges, programs specifically for individuals that have disabilities, including learning disabilities, kind of identified as an IQ of 70 and below. So just understanding that sometimes we're going to be taking a non-traditional path. The traditional path being that, a child turns 18, they graduate high school, and they go to higher education. A lot of times our kids might be behind some of their peers in their learning or in their maturity. So it may not be right now, but it may be down the road, and maybe a nice transition program, kind of think of it as a bridge to get them to that next level of education. That's all okay. And so I always just like to say it's not a race. And I know that when we're looking at social media and we're looking at all the great things that other people's kids are doing, sometimes it's hard not to get on that train of it's a race of what everybody else is doing. I think it's right where your child is at that time, and kind of meeting them where they are. So keeping an open mind, setting realistic expectations, and thinking about what are the possibilities. Is it a traditional path? Is it a non-traditional path? Sometimes kids will benefit from working for a few years prior to going to school. Some of our kids, the course load of 12 hours is too much. The Social Security Administration identifies full-time student as 8 hours, even on the higher education level. But sometimes maybe that's too much. And I'm a fan of like getting your feet wet. So maybe they take one course, okay? Maybe it's 1, 2, or 3 credit course. Most colleges and universities have an introduction to college studies that's actually a 4-credit course. And it's basically teaching them and going through what they need to do to be successful with higher education. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to be thinking about, talking about academic paths. This is university or degree programs. Could be the community college, could be the reduced course load that we were just talking about, living at home versus on campus. There are some different programs out there that help a person learn some of the life skills. There's something called the college living experience. Now, I always preface that to say it's an awesome program, but you would have the program cost of the college living experience where they live there and maybe go to a community college. Plus, you would have the expenses along with the college expenses. So then there's vocational and skills training, trade schools, certificate programs, licenses. I've got Texas Workforce Commission vocational rehab. For people that are listening in from out of state, there is vocational rehab in all states. We've done webinars on this before. But vocational rehab is funded by state and federally funded programs, and it is for individuals who have a disability that would be considered an impediment to employment, and they help through training programs. They do some testing and some training programs, and they help close those gaps. Depending on the program that you're looking at, your loved one may get a job coach. They help find jobs. They work with organizations that hire individuals with disabilities, and there can be a lot of stuff that comes out of the Texas Workforce Commission or vocational rehab. If your child is in public school, and a lot of private schools have this as well, there's usually a VR consultant tied to the school. So I suggest talking to them early. School's about to be out. I guess school probably is out for a lot of folks. You can submit yourself to vocational rehab online and by looking up vocational rehab and signing up for it that way. Then we think about transition and support. Transition programs, we have 18 plus programs where a lot of our students might stay in the public school post age 18 up to age 22. And there may be nice transition programs. I've heard of Mosaic and 18 plus, and there's a lot of different names for the transition programs, but you're going to want to talk to your school about these. There are also private pay. So the transition programs through the school are covered through your tax dollars. There are also private pay transition programs. Again, you're going to want to research those early to get them on the list. And so one of the things that I think about is we have a lifetime to pay for our kids with a disability. So if they're thriving in the school, and I understand sometimes people aren't, but if they're thriving, they have community, they have friends, they're learning, they're growing, I don't see the rush in pushing them out at age 18 when they can stay there to 21 or 22 and be growing their life skills and growing a number of things. And a lot of times there's a job coach involved, the VR is involved, they might have a part-time job. I know Summer Earn and Learn, the ship has sailed for this year. Summer Earn and Learn, the registration was back in February, but that is another program through the Workforce Commission where the kids get a job through the summer. And they're paid a regular wage, not underpaid, where they can try their hand with working and also have supports as they're doing that. So we also want to think about residential options. Now, in the future, what is your timeline? What are you thinking? We have some families that are thinking about I want my child to live outside of my house once they turn 18. Some it's 22, some it's 25. Some people say my child's going to live in my house until the day I die or I become incapacitated. What I would say for that is there are a lot of residential programs. We do entire webinars on residential programs that are available. Some of them have long waiting lists, so a lot of them require a tour before you get on their waiting list. And we suggest families start doing that. Start exploring what are those options, what might be a good fit. Are they private pay or do they take Medicaid waivers? How much do they cost? Those types of things. Because we may not always be able to do the things that we once did. And a lot of families also want some autonomy. They want their child to have some autonomy from them and to be able to grow their life, the life that they feel great about. So just think about some of those things. And we're more in favor of that than naming a sibling as a successor caregiver when you can't. So we like the idea of having a successor caregiver, but naming Another sibling is not always perfect. It's not always fair. It sometimes becomes a obligatory relationship as opposed to the loving relationship that you hope for your kids. So, we see siblings being the successor trustee of the special needs trust that is paying for care for their sibling, kind of the overseer, and then the siblings have a better relationship. So when we talk about that, when I say what I just said, I'm not stepping on anybody's toes here. So some people on here, they may have kids that have a 15 or a 20-year age gap, and that what I just said may be different. But a lot of our kids are similar in age. And our other children have hopes and dreams. They might want to go to college. They might want to have a really successful career. They might want to get married. They may have kids of their own. They may have kids of their own that have disabilities as well. They may have an unwilling spouse to take on that kind of responsibility. So the advice there is just choose wisely on that. So let's talk about the 6 success attributes of an individual for higher education, okay? So it's self-awareness, proactivity, perseverance, goal setting, using support systems, and emotional coping strategies. So some of these bullet points that you're seeing on the page, you might be sitting there thinking, that's not my kid. Or maybe we check the boxes for 3 of them, but we're still working on the other 3. It's okay. There are plenty of neurotypical kids that are lacking in some of these bullet points when they go to higher education. There are a lot of kids that go to higher education that are neurotypical, that they're not ready yet. They don't pass the success initiative. The TSI is what it's called in Texas, but most schools have a test, an entry test that decides on whether or not you're going to have to take non-credit courses to get up to speed, or if you will be able to take credit courses. This test is called the TSI in Texas Success Initiative. They're going to test reading, writing, and math, okay? And so, but there's also a lot of other certificate programs that don't require that, okay? So just want to mention that. Big public service announcement on offices of disability. They are all called something else. Could be called disability services, some call it ODS. They have different names. It might be called the Ability Center. There's all kinds of things, but the different campuses call it different things. And so the Office of Disabilities, this is where they can get the support that they need to be successful at higher education. So whether it is a university, whether it is a community college, this is where we're going to get their accommodations. So we're used to 504s and IEPs and ARD meetings and the public school service. Those things just don't automatically or magically transfer to higher education. And so you are going to want to check with the Office of Disability what their requirements are, what proof of testing that you have to have in order to get the accommodations. And this is something that I suggest people look at early, and look at every school that you're looking at, because the rules for one school are not the same at the other school, which I found really annoying when I was doing this with my kids. So check that out. And me personally, I looked at the schools that had the degree path or program that we were looking for first. And then I evaluated the offices of disability, and I narrowed down our search by my opinion of the greatness of the Office of Disability. If you as a parent know that your child needs accommodations and they're going to thrive with those accommodations, then missing out on some of those accommodations, like for instance, when I was looking at some offices of disability, some of them were a one-person show. Okay, and my opinion was there's too many students with disabilities for one person to be running the whole shebang, right? And so I leaned more towards offices of disability that had an entire staff. Okay, that's just my opinion. What services do they provide? What are free? Some of the things that I think of that are successful, that are helpful for kids with disabilities: audiobooks, voice to text recognition software. Some of them need testing in a distracted setting, undistracted setting. Some people need extra time. Maybe it's even up to 100% more time. But getting these in place is important. And the other thing that I want to mention here is getting these accommodations in place for ACT or SAT, or if they're taking any of those. You can go straight to the ACT and SAT website and type in disability in the search bar, and it'll come to their accommodations and how you get accommodations for those exams. If your child needs accommodations and they don't have accommodations for those exams, they're probably going to do poorly. So there is support for that. You can also work with the counselor at the school on getting those accommodations as well. So the key to your University Office of Disability, you're going to want to register, locate, and register with them. Provide the documentation from a qualified professional that basically verifies that the individual has a disability. Sometimes this is testing, sometimes this is old IEPs. It could be diagnoses from the doctor and a letter from the doctor of what the diagnoses are and how it affects their learning and what accommodations that they need. Look and see how old that the testing is that they will accept. Some will not accept testing that's older than 3 to 5 years old. Some will accept older testing if there is a letter, an accompanying letter from the doctor. So you're going to want to check with that. So this is also something that is important, is that these Offices of Disability want to work with your student. There is a FERPA. It's a form that has to be signed by your student for the school to talk to you as well. So we are a fan of getting that FERPA on file with the school. We are also a fan of having a power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, supported decision-making agreement if the child is not under guardianship. So a word on guardianship. As you're looking at these programs, you're going to need to specifically ask, do you accept students that are under full guardianship or not? Some programs do, and some programs absolutely will not. So that may be something that you want to think about. So we talked about some of the accommodations. There's so many, and there's so many different disabilities and how it affects that individual. So we talked about the extended time on test, permission to use a laptop or calculator during exams, note-taking assistance. It could be modifications to ensure buildings or facilities are accessible, assistive technology, listening devices, audiobooks, and we mentioned the text-to-speech software, voice recognition software. Those are all things that were helpful in my household. Modifications to attendance policies or deadlines if your disability impacts the ability to attend class regularly. Nowadays, there's so many online courses, and kind of do them as you will. There are definitive courses that start and stop at a specific time, and then there's kind of at-will courses as well. Okay. So when we're thinking about some of these specialized schools, everybody is going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording. There are programs literally all across the United States. There are many, many, many programs in Texas. So if you're in here today and you're checking in from Texas, there's lots of programs in Texas, but there's many, many programs all across the United States. So you guys are going to get today's slides. They'll have links to some of these programs out there. We do have families that have programs that have students in programs all across Texas, but we also have families that have kids in programs that are out of state. And that's going to be a very specific preference for you and what you can think. And I always say what your mom and daddy heart can stand. Sometimes the idea of a kid leaving out of state for a program is a little bit scary. So these schools offer IPSE programs, or inclusive post-secondary education programs, to provide academic, career, or independent living instruction with a typical university environment. So those are some of those, and again, you're going to get the links. You're going to get the links to explore these. So there's lots of links, and there's lots of programs in this presentation that you can play around with. I always say tour. go tour. Like there was one school in particular, and I won't name names, but it was my daughter's favorite school. She really, really, really wanted to go there, and she had a lot of friends that were going there, and it was great. But the campus, when we went and toured, it was really a lot of stone and a lot of steps, and it was kind of built into a hill, very beautiful, but not conducive at all for a person who has balance and equilibrium issues and is in a wheelchair. So that school got deselected quickly. So if your child has physical disabilities, I mean, like I was at that tour and thinking how great the place was, but I was also thinking if she falls down these steps, she will die. Like, I mean, and I'm not being dramatic. It was just very steep, all stone and those kind of things. And that was just something that we, that was one way that that school got off of our list. Okay. Another place that you can search for these programs that support kids with disabilities is Think College. There's over 358 post-secondary education programs for students with intellectual disabilities, and Join In is a central hub, and it's for students in Europe. Okay. So what if I just don't have time? I get that a lot. We got a lot of people with some big jobs, and they're not always sure that they can handle this themselves. We have some top college consultants that are specifically nuanced for finding higher education for kids with disabilities. And I would again say our situation is specialized, so work with a specialist. So if you're going to hire a college consultant for your student with disabilities, hire one that gets the disability landscape, because the other ones, just if you don't get it, you don't get it. They say if you know, you know. Well, these people know. And so if that's something that you're wanting to pay somebody and offload that to somebody else, these are going to be links to the organizations that do that. Okay. So I mentioned earlier college living experience support while in school. And so if people wanted to take a deeper dive into either college living experience, they do have campuses all across the country. It's not college, it's where they live amongst their peers, and they're learning, they're learning life skills, they're learning, they have community, they're building relationships. And they have over 100 colleges near their 8 locations across the United States. So this is a nice alternative for some people if the affordability is there. This is something where they can get somewhat of a traditional college experience, excuse me, with support. So Bloom Consulting, we've done entire webinars with each one of these, so you guys, again, can check that out on our YouTube channel. Okay, so Mansfield Hall is a living and learning community designed to support students who are both college capable and who may also have, still benefit from academic, executive functioning, social, or independent living skill support. These are in Madison, Wisconsin, Burlington, Vermont, and Eugene, Oregon. So we do have some families that have kids at the Madison location. Canopy College Coaching provides expert academic executive functioning and college life coaching to students at any college or university. So this is something that you can get alongside of some of their supports. So we've got, offices of disability. There are other programs at the school as well for first generation college students. So there are just some different programs, and you're going to want to check those out. Sometimes some of these services that I just mentioned, like Canopy college coaching or other things, if it's in line with their IPE, not the IEP, but the IPE, it might be covered by the Texas Workforce Commission. So this is what we were talking about. We've got entire webinars on the vocational rehab program, Texas Workforce Commission. Again, the vocational rehab program, they have programs all across the United States, not just in Texas, and it's designed to support people who have disabilities that could be an impediment to employment. They sometimes pay for college, okay? Sometimes they pay for the training or other things. Maybe they may help in trying to get them to work, and maybe they need transportation. So they might help with disability driving. So what you don't do is call vocational rehab and say, we were on the meeting with Consolidated Planning Group, and they said that vocational rehab will pay for disability driving services. That's not what we said. The person has to be enrolled with VR. They will have done some testing, and you'll work with the VR counselor. They're going to put an IPE, it's like a plan for work, in place. And with the services that you're asking for, if they're in line with the plan for work, then that's how they get paid. And what might get paid for little Johnny might not get paid for Sarah. So it's not, it's fine to compare notes with other families and what they're getting and or not, but your child, that it's an individualized plan of employment is what the IPE stands for. So it depends on what that plan is, on what they pay for. Okay. So one person said in the chat, what kind of programs do not accept children under guardianship? That's very interesting, and I've never heard of something like that. And that the frustrating thing with that is it's all across the board, and it doesn't mean none of them accept kids with guardianship. It depends on what the program is. If they're going to a traditional university, that university reserves the right to say yay or nay on accepting a child under guardianship. If you're going to like HCC, for instance, the VAST program, or Alvin Community College program for kids with intellectual disabilities, a lot of people with intellectual disabilities, not all, are under guardianship, and programs similar to that, they accept that. But if they're in a traditional program, they may not accept it. And again, to my own frustration, it's not universal. It's not like, well, they all do this or they all do that. It is very individualized to the very specific school, and you will have to ask the specific school what their policy is. And so I'm sorry that that is frustrating. I thought, why can't we just know this, like right across the board? And the other thing that I will say is that should not be a decision to get guardianship or not to get guardianship. We are not for or against. We are for what is most appropriate for the individual with a disability. And it comes down to whether or not they have capacity or they don't have capacity. Do they have capacity to sign a contract and understand what they're signing? Do they have the capacity to understand money? If they don't have capacity, then they may need guardianship or partial guardianship. And when you speak to an attorney about that, by the way, we've done entire webinars on guardianship. The attorney's job is to talk to you and talk to your student and guide you in the right direction of what might be the least restrictive and most appropriate for your loved one. So you don't have to know everything. So if you've been putting that appointment off with the attorney to have that discussion, don't put it off. And you can start those conversations 6 months prior to the child turning 18. If you say, well, gosh, my child is 22, am I too late? You're not too late. You can still have those conversations, but make sure we don't make a decision to have guardianship or not to have guardianship based off of the program that you want to go to, because if they should be under guardianship and they're not under guardianship, that could open up a whole other can of worms and problems in the future. So choose wisely, work with an attorney and a professional to kind of flesh out what might be best for you. So what about funding? There's that. As parents, we're always thinking, well, how much does that cost? Especially if we have multiple kids at college at the same time. I have a family member who has triplet boys, and they're all going to college for the first time in the fall. So luckily I didn't have triplets all in college at the same time. But so the FAFSA, it opens up in October every year to be considered for federal, state, and school-based financial aid. You need to complete that even if you say, well, we make too much money. I already know we don't qualify. I hear that all the time. Some of the scholarships that are out there require that the FAFSA would be completed to even submit for the scholarship. File as soon as possible after the application opens up to maximize your eligibility for first come, first serve aid. These applications open up in October, the year before they would start in the fall. Should you apply even if you I just mentioned that you should apply even if you think your income is too high. So scholarships, look for scholarships from various sources, including your school, community groups, private organizations. I think about the child life specialist at the specialty clinic that you see at the children's hospital, disease specific organizations. If your child has type 1 diabetes, if they're on the autism spectrum, ADHD, there are a lot of disease specific, diagnosis specific scholarship funds. Of course, we have the 529 college savings plan. That's a place that we can pay for college. And I want to just mention here, I know we're not really taking a deep dive in SSI and Medicaid and things like that. The college savings plan, if you have a college savings plan for your loved one that has a disability and they're not going to go to college, you can transfer this year $20,000 a year from the college savings plan to an ABLE account. We can help you do that. And an ABLE account will broaden what you can spend the money on if they're not going to higher education. The other thing that I want to mention to you is the college savings plan is not used against them for Medicaid and SSI purposes, because basically, typically the parent or the grandparent is the owner of the college savings plan. The beneficiary is the school for the benefit of said child, so the checks would be made payable to the school. So the assets in the college savings plan will not be counted against them for SSI and Medicaid. Another thing that can happen if you have a child that has a 529 account that was established before you knew they weren't going to go to college, if you have another student that is going to go to college, you can change the beneficiary on that college savings plan to the other kid that is going to go to college. So we can take a deeper dive with you on that. I know everybody has their own questions on that. But again, the ABLE account is an account that we can have money more than the $2,000 allowed by Medicaid, and it can pay for higher education. It can pay for transition programs. In fact, an ABLE account can pay for anything that is construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. So that might give you some more flexibility on that. Okay, my slides just went crazy. So let me get back to where we were. You're going to have a lot of slides that are going to have links to scholarships in there. We're not going to go through them one by one. You guys can do that on your personal time, but lots of links, and be creative. Like I said, ask around, look and research. I had a whole spreadsheet of which ones we were considering. Some schools have them on their website. Most schools have them on their website, but there's a lot of other ones out there that are not on their website. So you're going to want to look at that. And on your spreadsheet, you're going to want to identify what school it's with or who the scholarship is with. When do the scholarship applications open up? When do they close? What are the requirements? Those are all things that I would be thinking about. A lot of times the applications open up for scholarships. So it's their senior year in high school, and those applications open up in December of their senior year. So we're talking about fall of next year. They open up anywhere from November to April. It just depends. And so you want to plan early for that. We already talked about vocational rehab, so I'm going to move on from that. There's lots of pages here and links to scholarships and things to think about. I always like to mention the state college tuition waiver for children that were adopted through the Department of Family Services adoption system through the state. If your child was adopted through the state, there is college, higher education for those kids. So that's true in Texas. It's true in other states as well. Now, if they went through private adoption, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. But if they went through the Department of Family Services or through a state adoption, then they should have coverage, and their college could literally be completely paid for, are very close anyway. Okay. So some additional scholarships on that page. Here's some books to consider. The guide to colleges for students with learning differences. We like the FISC guide to colleges and colleges that change lives. These are all books that I think are valid and good. And so, there may be a particular school, everybody went to A&M, everybody went to UT or things like that. There are lots and lots of colleges here that are pretty fantastic. They're much smaller classes. Your child doesn't get swallowed up in these giant lecture halls and other things like that. So looking at some of these colleges that change lives, a lot of these schools do very well with kids with disabilities, and thinking outside of the box of the, the traditional ones that come to mind may be important. So a couple of questions that we had today is, how can the team help my daughter? So when it comes to planning for special needs, what we're doing is holistic planning. We're figuring out, how do you retire and stay retired and still have enough money to fund a special needs trust? We're thinking about what's next. What's next after high school? Looking at those transition programs. What's next when I can no longer care for my loved one as it relates to residential? What's next on the higher education? So when it comes to working with Consolidated Planning Group, and I'll put the slide up in a moment, we always offer a personalized consultation. This will be by Zoom. We want to learn a little bit more about your family, what brings you to the meeting. We're going to share with you the doors that you can walk through with us. We're never here to rain on any great planning that you've already done. We do seek to understand what's already in place. We want to understand what your goals are for yourselves, for your loved ones, so that way we can build a comprehensive plan and show you, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like in black and white. Here's the knobs that we need to turn between now and the time I retire, or my earnings years, to be where I need to be. So we can definitely help with all of those things. These are things that we're going to want you to keep on your radar as it relates to planning. We share these a lot in our webinars, and we have done webinars on all of these topics. So developing a special needs care plan. Again, as parents, we have forgot more than anybody will ever know as it relates to caring for our loved one with a disability. And sometimes if there's one person in the household that is providing caregiving services, and the other person in the household is earning income for the family, sometimes the other person in the household doesn't even know what the other one knows. So really having a solid plan and not waiting until the crisis happens. Crisis happens. People have heart attacks, people have strokes, people die unexpectedly. And that's not something that I'm saying to scare you. I'm just saying, think of your life, think of the people that you know in your life, the people that you've worked with, or other things. And what I would say is, we all know that the ifs in life happen. And for some of you that are here today, the ifs in life have definitely happened to you. So don't put it off. Just dust off wherever you've left off and don't put it off. Future care cost estimates, we spoke about that at the beginning. Small, medium, and large. How much money do we need to fund the Special Needs Trust? Medicaid waivers. We call them Texas waivers here. Medicaid waivers. Every state has Medicaid waivers, and Medicaid waivers are designed to waive off some of the cost of care for caring for an individual with a disability, to keep them in home and community-based services. We have an entire webinar on Medicaid waivers. I think Michelle did that yesterday. So that lives on the YouTube channel as well. Unfortunately for Texans, the waiting list for Medicaid waivers is upwards of 20 years. So it's going to be 20 years before a kid gets services. That's a long time, and it's unfortunate. Some states don't have waiting lists. Other states, like Florida, has a waiting list that is similar to ours. So I'm making sure that they are on the waiting list. If there is a waiting list in your state, and understanding what those Medicaid waivers are and how they may defray some of the costs for your loved one with a disability in the future is important. And on that note, I just want to mention this, because some people ask all the time, and you're probably sitting here, well, what states don't have lists? There's a lot of states that don't have waiting lists. And then people say, well, would I be better off to just move to XYZ state? We've done lots of financial analysis on that, and the answer is usually no. Texas doesn't have any state income tax. The cost of living in Texas is much lower. The states that typically do not have a waiting list, or have a much shorter waiting list, they have state income tax, and the cost of living is much higher. So it's like you're swapping one problem for another problem, and it's not always the best answer to move to another state, okay? SSI and SSDI, understanding the differences, knowing when and how to apply. You'll see that on our Government Benefits 101 on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. ABLE accounts are under the tax code 529A. It is a place money grows tax-free, and there's tax-free distributions for your individual with a disability. The money is not going to count against them for SSI and Medicaid purposes as long as the account balance is below 100,000 is what it takes for SSI purposes. Beneficiary designations. I mentioned this a lot. If you've been attending our webinars, you've probably heard me and Michelle say this for years. It is super, super important not to name your loved one with a disability directly as a beneficiary on anything you have. Life insurance, disability, long-term care, annuities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, 401ks, 403bs. Don't name them directly as a beneficiary. The right way to name them is to have a special needs trust, a third-party special needs trust, and we name the special needs trust for their benefit. We don't want them to get a large lump sum directly in their name because they will disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. So we talk about that a lot, and part of our planning process, we're going to help you identify if you have any problems there. The other thing that I will say is if you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh snap, I just wrote that down, I need to check this. First off, if you haven't checked your beneficiaries and your contingent or backup beneficiaries lately, you should check them. Second, if you have named, a lot of people name their spouse as beneficiary, and if I die and my spouse is dead and gone, then I name all of my children equally as beneficiaries. And if you've done that, you're not crazy. A lot of people have done it. It's wrong, but you can fix it, and so don't panic. So it's an easy fix. It's a free fix of changing the beneficiary and not naming your child specifically. So what's not free is if you don't have a third-party special needs trust set up already, you will need to work with an attorney. We do provide referrals for attorneys that are specifically nuanced with special needs as it relates to drafting that special needs trust. But these companies, your 401k provider, your life insurance company, they all have change of beneficiary forms that you can request for free to get this changed, and we do encourage you to do that. The other thing that has happened to people before is they get their wills done and they said, well, you know, everything goes to XYZ in the will, and then they don't update or change their beneficiaries, and that is wrong. When you do your will and your legal documents, that is one step, but the next step is to update your beneficiaries on your financial accounts and life insurance and things like that. The beneficiary trumps everything. So if I'm named as a beneficiary for my spouse and my spouse did a will that says everything goes to a kid, everything that's in the will would go to the kid, but any kind of life insurance that I'm named as the beneficiary, then I would still be the beneficiary. It's really important to get this taken care of. Special needs trust, how to fund them. We have entire webinars, many webinars with many attorneys that are nuanced with special needs on our YouTube channel. Lots of attorneys out there. We only partner with attorneys for these webinars that are specifically nuanced with special needs. They know what they're doing. They're great. We've had lots of clients use them over the years. And, you know, I always just like to mention there is an intersection of what we do and what the attorneys do. The attorneys don't do what we do. They're not the money. We're the money. How much money do we need? How much money do we have? How much money can we draw in retirement? We are, the public benefits. How and when do we apply for these public benefits? But the attorneys are going to draw up those legal documents, the guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, special needs trust, wills, power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. Those are all things that the attorney is going to draw. So we work very closely with the attorney, but we don't do what they do and they don't do what we do. So it's important, again, so whether, we say whether you work with us or you work with somebody else, work with professionals that truly understand special needs. When you get an attorney or a financial advisor that dabble in special needs, you usually end up having to redo it and spend more money than it would have cost to just work with somebody that knows what they're doing with that. Okay. And then we've talked about the post-high school options today. So in our slides that you guys are going to get via email, and I always say check your spam, and also whenever you sign up for a webinar with us, there's a question when you register of do you want to do you want communications from us or do you want emails from us? If you say no, you're not going to get an email with the slides. So if you say yes, you'll get the email with the slides and a link to the recording. If you say no, you will not. Sometimes these emails go to your spam, so you may want to check your spam. If you're missing one, they always live on the YouTube channel, but if you're missing one and you would like a copy of the slides, then you just email us and we'll be happy to send that to you. So this is our upcoming webinars that you can register for. When you register for a webinar, even if you don't attend, you will get an email with the recording and a link, the presentation and a link to the recording. Okay, so this is our team here. We work on a collaborative team here at CPG. Myself and Jeff and Andy and Michelle Morris. We have 5 full-time staff. Again, nationally certified Social Security advisors, charter special needs consultants, members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. Our whole firm is standing ready to help you plan for the future of your loved one. We always offer free personalized consultation. This QR code will take you to our calendar where you can book your free consultation. You also may hear from our team at CPG asking if you had any additional questions from this webinar that you didn't get answered. Maybe you were nervous, you didn't want to put them in the chat box, or it was just a personal thing that you wanted to talk one off with us on, and they'll be happy to get you scheduled. Our consultations are by Zoom, and they're a 45-minute consultation. And again, we're going to talk to you about the planning that you've done so far and share with you the doors that you can walk through with CPG and how we may be able to help you going forward. So having said that, that is all that I have for today, but I would like to take any other questions. Does anybody have any additional questions? If you could put those in the chat box now, we do have some time for additional questions. While you're doing that, the other question that was wrote in said, what are your thoughts on the present stigmas that prevent parents from accessing community supports for services? That is a loaded question. Thank you for submitting it. What I would say is, for me, as a parent to adult kids with disabilities, I'm an over around it through kind of girl. Like, make it happen. I just can't care what the stigma is. I have been on the relentless pursuit of information to help my kids live their best life. And I don't take any prisoners and I don't make any apologies for that. And so there is a lot of frustration, and that is why we have our YouTube channel and we provide these webinars of why is everything so hard? Why is it hard to deal with Health and Human Services or Medicaid? Why is it hard? Why is there a 20-year waiting list? Why is it hard to deal with the Social Security Administration? Why do I feel so inept? Or why do I feel like I'm going to mess everything up if I say one thing or I do one thing when you're talking to these organizations? Why is it so hard to get the IEP implemented at school or to have the growth? There's so many challenges that we all face as parents. And so I would say fight the good fight, know that you're not alone, and keep advocating and to change some of these stigmas. Some of the biggest stigmas that I think, it's not just an individual with an intellectual disability or IDD or IQ below 70. There's a lot of mental health stigmas out there too, where we may have a child that has I call it the alphabet soup of diagnoses of mental health diagnoses, and maybe they don't have an intellectual disability. And so, it's harder to get services for them, but there are services. And so we just want you to be encouraged and know that you can get them. One person said, thank you, my son didn't start to struggle until he was 19, so I don't know how to start. Well, good news is that as long as a child's disability started prior to age 22, and this is a whole nother webinar, they could be covered under a parent's record for Social Security purposes in the future. And what I would say is schedule a consultation. We'll talk to you about that and kind of what's next, and can help guide your steps of where you need to start. A lot of people are in that position. We actually see a lot of people between the ages 18 and 22 that are on the autism or ADHD spectrum, where schizophrenia, schizoaffective, or other big emotional diagnoses are coming and are changing everything, and it's really scary. And I know for sure and firsthand that when we have emotional diagnoses and we need care, and it's bigger than a 50-minute session with the therapist, the resources aren't great. I've spent months researching those. It's not great, and how to know what's good and not good, and where to send them, and how to get this covered. Because if it's not covered by insurance, some of these places they're 35,000 to 50,000 a month. So there are resources. We can direct you in that way, but just know wherever it is. I mean, we've had people that had neurotypical kids, and then there was an accident and they were totally disabled. Obviously there's people, we've had a lot of people, this is a true story. Lots of people have kids that have disabilities, but were just recently diagnosed with autism. So now they're 22 years old and was just diagnosed with autism, which, as a parent, that feels terrible, right? Because you think, how did I miss that? Well, all the doctors missed it, so don't worry. And you're not alone. It is happening a lot. So there may be additional services that are available. And a diagnosis of autism, even if it's after age 22, it's a congenital condition. So they were born with it, which is not diagnosed till after 22. So there may be services for that as well. So guys, it has certainly been my pleasure being here with you today. You guys have asked good questions. Thanks for letting us share. And again, we definitely look forward to partnering with you again in the future. Check out your inboxes later today, maybe later today or tomorrow. We'll send you a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording, and we'll look forward to meeting with you for an initial consultation. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye now.